What's up, everybody? We are back with another episode of Pound for Pound. I am the Nigerian Nightmare, Kamaru Usman.
Henry Cejudo, a.k.a. Triple C.
And we have a very special guest today. I mean, a guy that needs no introduction. I've heard him referred to as the voice of the Octagon. I grew up in the Octagon, and this man was already here. So we kind of had that journey together to where he is now, the journey to superstardom. The voice of the Octagon, Mr. JON ANIK.
Give it up.
What an absolute pleasure. What an amazing staff, all the fancy cameras. We are in Las Vegas. It is UFC Fight Week for Sphere, and what an honor to be with you two absolute legends and future UFC Hall of Famers. Kamaru Usman made his UFC debut in 2015. I called that fight with Brian Stan against Haider Hassan. B-Stan told me that night at dinner, that Kamaru would be the champ, and the rest is history. But yeah, it's crazy. I mean, oftentimes I'm the oldest man in the room. That is the case today, but I would not have it any other way to be with you boys. Chop it up a little bit.
A Shadowline production.
Look at that, just a pro. You see how he just went into character and just ran off a script right there.
Yeah, but I will say this. He didn't say anything about me, John.
Oh, Triple C. I mean, you
Yeah,
know,
future Hall of
the
Famer.
artist to be known in the future as C4. You know how much love I have. You know, Message Sent, one of my all-time favorite
like
calls, of course,
that.
for Henry
I
Cejudo.
love
You know
what you did.
You
I
know how
love
much
that.
love I have for you.
That piece that you did on me, it was just the best piece anybody's ever done, man.
Well, and I'm nothing without my prep. So even today, it came across my wake that Henry Cejudo got past a Georgian en route to the 2008 Olympic gold medal. And so I said to him before the show, you know, maybe we get that Marab one back. But the match you really needed to beat a Georgian in was in the Olympics. You got that one done.
That's right. John's too good. He's too good.
I mean, he needed to beat the other Georgia too, because he would be C4 right now.
That's right.
You would be fighting right now.
True, man. But that's what happens, man. Father time, Kush, you know. You know, came back 3 years later. I mean, we gotta respect the game.
No, yeah. So it's and you said it when we had a conversation with Marab, and you said it. It's very difficult to cheat this game all the time. We get away with it once or twice, or maybe 3 times, but it's over time it gets difficult to cheat the game. So stepping in there with a hurt groin, knowing that you could do the things that you needed to do to prepare for that competition, and you go up against a guy who sees nothing but that he sees what we saw on the way on our quest up here. And so when you go against that and you're rolling the dice, and you roll the dice, which I'm sure you've done plenty of times in the opposite end. So this one you just fell a little short, but you're not too far off from that. I mean, you're a fight away. I mean, you was just on here talking to Sean O'Malley saying, you know, I hope he loses so I can fight this guy.
But that's how it is, right, John? I mean, obviously you've been part of the game like for a minute now, and I think you've seen how this game has evolved, not just through the technique, the tactics, but also through social media. You see how guys are now chirping because they're starting to understand, and it's just a business thing, Kamaru. Like, it's just a business thing for me. And I think you're starting to understand these fighters that really want to fight, if they really want to be known, you got to use that mouthpiece. There's only one George St. Pierre. You know, that's the only person that I can really think of that's just loved, that's beloved.
Henry, are you absolutely right? And this is a question that we have for you, John, is I guess I would be considered an old head when it comes to this. People say, no, he's old. And I'm like, what? I'm not, no. What the fuck are you talking about?
You're an OG?
But they say that. And I guess where I can kind of agree is my approach to the sport is I don't necessarily care for this whole social media era. I don't care for this, oh, you got to talk this, talk that. For me, it was always, I'm going to state what I know I'm going to do or what I think I'm going to do. And that's it. I don't necessarily have to get into this whole game of trolling now. The aspect they say the whole trolling thing. I don't even know what that is.
Good partner?
Yeah.
I don't even know what I
don't
mind. Get that.
Take the venom. Yeah, I like that.
I don't get it. And so for me, it's I guess I'm still I have an old approach to where if I get in front of that press conference, I'm going to tell you, Saturday night, I'm going to send this guy's head to the moon, and I'm going to go out there really, and I'm going to try to do that. But for these guys now, how have you seen the sport just kind of evolve and change where some guys might not necessarily have the ability to send someone's head to the moon, but they're just going to say it?
Well, Obviously, this Sphere show is pretty special, and it will have evaporated by the time a lot of people ingest this content, but we have a lot of Mexican absolute warriors set to be showcased here, and some of them have embraced speaking the English language. And a guy like Daniel Zellhuber, that's going to help him get to a just different type of stratosphere here domestically in the United States. I'm not going to bore you guys with my thoughts on how the game has changed as far as the technique and the skills are concerned. You don't need to hear that. I mean, certainly I think Islam Makhachev is a lot better than the lightweights of 15 years ago. But in terms of the overall domestic footprint that we have. You know, I've been fighting for this sport as a non-athlete since 2007 in Bristol, Connecticut at ESPN when we were the redheaded stepchild and nobody wanted to put us on TV. And now here we are 17 years later, and we have the ESPN deal on the back end of the Fox deal and all these big things happening in the U.S. and who knows where we're going to be in the future. But there's still work to be done, right? Like we go to Australia and it's almost like the NFL being king here. That's what the UFC is over there. So there's been tremendous growth. Social media plays a big role. The extent to which, you know, these respectable mixed martial arts athletes embrace it obviously varies. But I'm just hopeful that in another 10 years that we've taken that requisite next step here in the U.S. Because as happy as I am about the progress, you know, I still am greedy. You know, I want the NHL to be a distant fourth when it comes to the UFC and MMA in the U.S. because that's where we live.
You hit the nail on the head, but what about on the social media aspect?
Yeah.
Right? On the promotional aspect as it pertains to fighters? What is the biggest change that you've seen? I know what I've seen from when I came into the UFC.
Yeah.
What is the biggest change that you've seen?
Well, I think for a lot of fighters, and I was sort of iterating some of that, it's an inconvenient truth because martial arts is so rooted in respect, right? And even when it comes to accepting a gambling sponsor.
But is it?
Well, I
It
think for a
is.
lot of these
It
athletes,
is.
they have a really hard time stepping into any sort of cringy triple C mode with respect, you know? And I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of fighters fail
Yeah.
when trying to
But
be...
I'm going to follow up on that, but go
Please.
ahead.
Well, no, it's your show. I mean, I just feel like those athletes, and I always talk about Conor McGregor. I'm an orator, right? People give
Yeah.
me credit for my orating skills.
Yeah.
Conor McGregor's a fucking master orator, and most
Yeah.
of his information and his verbal stuff was not pre-written, right?
Yeah.
He just has an ability to say, who the fuck is that guy on a live microphone, you know? So most of these guys don't have that innate ability, whether they pre-rehearse what they say or not, you know? So Conor had it. Not too many who have followed do.
Yeah, I think I almost feel like I kind of fell into the character because in real life I am a cornball. Like, I'm a very happy dude. I'm a very carefree human. But at the same time, at the time that I started, like kind of like the king of cringe, it was the flyweight division was wasn't the chopping block. Well, I was literally with Dana White, and Dana White said, Henry, I was literally right after I beat Demetrius Johnson. Was driving his red Ferrari. He's like, hey, man, I just want to let you know that I'm going to give you an opportunity to go up to 135 pounds. But as you get the opportunity to fight for a second bout, the division's going to be gone. So it just didn't sit well with me. At that time, I was the messenger, right? Message sent.
That's right.
And I said, I have to do something to put it in my hands to be able to save this division. So we go back. I ended up being in that fight with TJ Dillashaw. I said, you know what? Let's bring him down. I'm going to beat him up at 125 pounds. I'm going to go up once I beat him, and I'll just double dip. And the plan ended up working. So we're at the press conference. I finally pull out the snake, and then boom, and then I smash it on the ground. That shit went viral. It went viral, and then people were just like, cringe. That dude's cringe. That's the king of cringe.
Yeah.
Cringe. And I'm just like, that's the perfect way to save the division. 2 fights later, Henry Cejudo saved 55 jobs.
And watching your videos with the pillows, right? I couldn't wait for those, right? Like Bo Nickel used to do like Steak Saturday, right? And I couldn't wait to see Bo Nickel eating a piece of steak. And I couldn't wait to see you in whatever getup with pillows.
Challenging Valentina Shevchenko. Come on, dude. But the job was done. And I'm proud of that. From the messenger to the triple C to the king of cringe, there's something to be said when you're willing to really expose yourself out there and actually have true humility. True humility is somebody that's willing to go out there and expose themselves to the world to obtain something, whether you win or you lose.
That's true, but I do believe there's a fine line. There's a fine line because it takes a lot for someone to say, you know what, I'm going to be king of cringe. I'm going to do something that is just very cringy. It also takes a lot for a guy to go, oh, I'm going to step into this character like Kobe Covington has.
Yeah.
And I'm going to really, I don't,
Yeah.
like, so is that, would you say that's humility as well? Because
No.
this is where the line gets blurred here. And that I've seen such a humongous transformation and change in the sport as the sport has become way more mainstream from when I came in watching Rampage Jackson, Rashad Evans, and these legends to where now it's the Kobe Covington. I mean, and you're right. And that's when we have to give props where props is due. Conor is it's just, you don't ask for the gifts that God give you.
Right.
To be in the perfect place, to have the accent,
Right.
to be able
That's
to
part of
still
it for
to have
sure.
the accent, to have the a different type of look, to where you also could fight. Once upon a time, could fight. I mean, all of that is perfect combination.
Yeah.
To where, and he says something on, and just witty enough to be able to just run it off like that. That's special. But you have guys now like I said, like the Kobe Covington, which it works for him. It is what it is. I don't, no shade to that.
Yeah.
But where's that fine line of this is distasteful right now?
So Dana White has been asked about that, and largely I subscribe to his theory that all is kind of fair in the fight game. Now, Colby Covington is an interesting case for me because he and I have had public back and forth, right? There was a time when one of my colleagues, whose name I won't mention right now, I felt like he kind of undercut Colby when Colby won the interim championship, and I ended up calling out this colleague publicly, right? Then you fast forward a few years, Colby Covington takes issue with something with me and calls out my children, right? He's just playing a character. It has worked for him to whatever degree, but I think he did sell his soul a little bit, and I think unlike Henry, it's going to affect his life in ways that maybe will be inconvenient thereafter. So I wasn't affected by his words about me, and I have a lot of respect for him as fighter and human being. Our fighter meetings take on an entirely different context. But I think for Colby, that's a question that he's going to have to answer, whereas most athletes won't. They've just, the Chael Sonnen types are sort of playing the game. But I don't, it's more about actions than words for me. I really don't. There's been a lot of shit said.
Yeah. So speaking about Kobe, obviously, I mean there is that fine line, and as you said, and I'm glad you said that about Dana White, because Mike Tyson said the same thing when he used to co-host Hot Boxing with them, and we're with Khabib, and then I was just like, hey man, like to what extent, Conor was talking about his dead dad, like I'm like, to what extent, Mike, did you do your action shut? Did you have a level of really cutting things off? And he was like, listen, man, same thing what Dana White said. Listen, man, everything goes.
Yeah.
But everything goes on their side. But was there ever a position where you're like, you know what? I want to prosecute this dude. This dude's talking about my kids, talking about doing something. Was there ever a time where you're like, hey, dude, this is beyond me?
Wait,
and
what?
Yeah, of course, man. Like,
For John,
there was
yes,
somewhat
that's
somewhat of a threat, right? There
Well,
was something
yeah, I
that
mean,
was said. I forget exactly, John. But
Certainly, I think in other walks of life, if I worked for a network and not the UFC, they certainly would not have liked those type of words. John Anik's kids maybe growing up without a dad. I felt like Jorge Gamebred Masvidal was actually going to get to my house first in South Florida to protect my ass from Colby Covington. But no, I mean, I'm very sensitive to fighters having any sort of issue with me. So if I'm being totally truthful with your audience, I reached out to Colby at that point in time and just wanted to make sure that I would be in a position to do the next fighter meeting with him and call the next fight. And I didn't know exactly what drew his venom, and it was really just him
so you don't know if
being
it's
a character.
You don't know if it's a character or if it's him. And how did that go? Were you able to kind of hash
all
it
good?
out with him?
Yeah, no. And again, it was just sort of him, I think, largely being in character. And
Colby's a sweetheart,
we did our
dude.
next
He's a
fighter
sweetheart.
meeting, and I am 46 years of age. I am far less sensitive than I was when I started this job at 32 or 33. There's not a show that goes by where some fighter or coach or fan or boss or someone is upset with something I've uttered over 8 hours, but largely I live by those calls. And I will tell you one thing. Bilal Muhammad is one of my best friends in the world, but he compared Leon Edwards' tone to an autistic kid when we were in Manchester. And I spent much of my formative years teaching autistic kids, preschool to high school. I worked as a vocational coordinator, a job coach. So you drop the R word or autism in front of me and you lose me with finality, right? And I wasn't afraid to go at my dear friend Bilal publicly, right? So I Dominic Cruz in your fight. I defended Keith Peterson when he said he smelled like beer, even if I did think maybe in retrospect the stoppage was a little bit premature, right? But like I had to put my friendship with Dominic Cruz in jeopardy to defend Keith, which I thought in the moment was the right thing. So.
Yeah.
I think that's where this thing gets challenging. Is just being able to find that fine line, like you mentioned with your friend, Bilal, that you just mentioned. See how easy it is for me to forget his name.
That was good.
See how easy.
Look how good you are.
Just,
Handsome too.
No, I'm serious.
Forgets the name.
I don't never remember it. But yeah, that's the thing, is finding that fine line, because like that's the game now is trolling. They're just trolling. But there's a fine line of what you can or can't do, and that I've always lived by that principle.
Yeah.
As we mentioned, this is martial arts, and discipline and just respect is one of those main principles when you first get in. All right, guys, time to give a big shout out to our partners at Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play fantasy sports. Underdog's pick'em game is as easy as choosing higher or lower on a variety of different stats. And this weekend, they've got another pick'em special for NFL fans. Aaron Rodgers is finally reuniting with star receiver Devontae Adams, and he'll only need 1 yard on Sunday night for us to win. Underdog is available in 30 plus states, including California, Texas, and New York. Use code P4P as pound for pound to support the show. Click the link down below to get started. Now let's get back to the interview with Mr. Jon Anik. You know, enough about that. Let's get into you, Jon, because it's you've had an interesting journey here in the company to where you are now. You are the voice of the Octagon, to where you just turn it on. You walk in and boom, turn it on, and it's just that energy is just there to where you've mastered it. And I remember, because there was a time, because as soon as I was coming in is when there was the big change,
Right.
and previously the voice of the Octagon was Goldberg.
Right.
So where it was, when you heard his voice, it was, we were excited. Right. It was UFC, to where now that's been transformed to where it's you. And talk about kind of your journey a little bit from radio, because you started out in radio, and then ESPN radio, and then next thing you know, you're here calling MMA.
Yeah, it happened pretty quickly. You know, I was doing a boxing radio show, and mixed martial arts was this avalanche that just kept coming, and ignore it at your own peril. I covered Elite XC1 in 2007. Right. That was the first MMA show I attended. The main event was Renzo Gracie against Frank Shamrock, and I just felt at that time, as a boxing defender and apologist, that MMA just had more to offer. I was already getting sick of boxing and some of the holding the referees would let the athletes get away with. I covered a boxing death in 2005 that sort of shook me in a bad way. Rest in peace, Levander Johnson. So I got an opportunity to call Bellator Season 1 in 2009, and I felt like they got the wrong guy. I hadn't called any mixed martial arts at all, and there was just nothing like calling live MMA. And the UFC was doubling their schedule in 2011. Craig Borsari, my now boss, approached me the night John Jones beat Shogun and said, have your agent call me on Monday. And, you know, I've said on a lot of hot microphones, I never would have left ESPN if I didn't think that eventually I could ascend to the #1 seed and maybe work with Joe Rogan. I didn't think it would happen as quickly as it did. You know, I took over doing the pay-per-views. This will be my 99th straight pay-per-view here. And, yeah, I just feel like I was groomed the right way.
Most in history.
Well, I guess for a play-by-play guy, I think I've called the most fights, but Joe Rogan certainly has me in that regard, I would think. But yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy grind. You know, I do think that, you know, to whatever degree my personal life has paid a little bit of the price. I don't know how many bullets I have left in the chamber. I've been to Brazil 31 times. I've gone from South Florida, Perth, Western Australia 3 times. It's been a labor of love, to be sure, but our live events are these unique beasts. And I guess to your point, the one thing I can always control is my energy. So people don't care how I feel. I just need to make it come alive. And Dana really responds to energy, so we try to bring it every Saturday night.
Yeah. So John, you kind of brought it up a little bit, and I've asked you this before too. I'm like, how is it that you give a lot of energy to us? You do a lot of traveling. How do you jug the family life with everything that you're doing, where you make sure that you're also, you know, giving that same attention? Yeah. As you know, because obviously we know, and we're grateful, man, to have you part of. Like, it's for the longest, man. It took me a minute to get used to Jon Anik. 'Cause I also used to Goldberg.
Of course,
we grew up in that era.
Of course.
And then when you came in, it was just like, man, now it's like, dude, this is the best thing that could ever happen to by a play-by-play. But how is it that you actually are able to kind of juggle both lives, man? Life
I
of a
don't
traveling
know
man.
that I've done a great job. I certainly would defend how I have parented my children. I try to be ever present. I donate my weekends to my daughters when I'm home because I'm gone 100 nights a year. But I'm 13 years into being gone 100 nights a year. So at some point, for my eldest daughter, who's in 8th grade, maybe you make a more selfless career decision and maybe do some stuff that's a little bit closer to home. But it's tough, right? Like, I care so much about this fan base, the lifeblood of the sport, that what am I going to go to the UFC and say, hey, man, can we peel back the internationals and give me that Rogan schedule? Like, I feel like the athletes deserve to have all of us in Australia, right? So I don't know that I've done a great balancing act in terms of creating recreational time and ultimately my happiness. But I know one way when it comes to this job, and it consumes me for better or for worse.
You know, that's so interesting that you say that, because we've talked a little bit before off camera, and I think this is something that's extremely important. Is everyone has their life to live. That's the gift that you're given by God. You have your life, and it is your journey. It is just yours. Everything that you go through, everything that you do in life, it's all up here in just your memory. And so your parents, they had that. And they made the sacrifices that they needed to make for not just you guys, but for themselves. And so now you are being placed in that position to where you have to make the sacrifice that you need to make for yourself, but also for your family. You can't be in two places at once because it's. I mean, obviously, eventually we'll get into cloning, and you can clone, but it's still not. Even if you do clone yourself, it's still not your. And so, with that being said, is your children are going to have. They're going to run into this, the exact same situation that you're in. They're going to run into that.
Yep.
To where they have to make.
So, Kamaru, you're talking about
that situation.
Like decision making, right?
Yes, and so, and it's the decision of. Do I do what I consider is right by myself, or do I do something that I consider is right for someone else?
Right.
Either way, something's going to suffer. Either I'm going to suffer, or they're going to suffer.
Yes.
To some degree.
Yeah.
And it's something, and it's a quote that James Brown used to always say, and it's, at the end of the day, you should be happy if you did right by yourself. And I want you to understand that, because I know you, and we've spoken about it. That's a conflicting thing, because I go through it too. I battle with this, because if I'm gone, and I'm ultra worried about the information that my children are taking in. And if I'm gone and I'm not there, I'm gone because I'm trying to create a better life for them. But at the same time, that time of me not being there. So I don't think you should be too hard on yourself. I think the one thing that you should always be able, because I'm battling with that, the one thing you should always be able to say is, I did right by myself. And as long as I didn't hurt anyone else maliciously, I did right by myself.
Sometimes it's hard to, and I appreciate you saying that, especially on live television, but sometimes it's hard to sort of find whatever source of your unhappiness may be. It's like, man, I got my dream job. I got, what exactly, why am I not waking up in this blissful state every day? And change is hard, right? I remember Dana White pulling me in when he was giving me the job for the first time. He's like, we didn't hire you to be Mike Goldberg or Joe Rogan. People are going to fucking hate you. They don't like change. And change is something that is hard and takes balls. It's easier to sort of stay the course.
I'm going to raise my hand. I was one of those guys.
Right? Yeah.
I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
Mike Goldberg was the voice of MMA. So when you heard that, it was, okay, it's Mike Goldberg.
Here we go.
And then all of a sudden, it's JON ANIK, which you were good. But it was just different. It's different tone.
Dude, like a year and a half after you beat Hyder Hassan, right?
Right.
I am out back at TV Truck in Vegas, and I get pulled aside by my boss, Zach Candido, and he tells me that the company's moving on from Mike Goldberg. And dude, like, I buckled to my fucking knees, you know, because certainly I had joined the company in 2011. I didn't expect it would happen that soon, but I certainly, you know, right now I'm trying to create a gap between whoever's trying to come take my job. You know what I mean? And I will never forget that moment. And you know, it's crazy to think here we are 7 or 8 years later, but my head is to the pavement. I'm just focused on what I'm trying to do. And, you know, when Kamaru Usman and Henry Cejudo called during the busiest week of my career, you take that call, but you're the only guys I'm squeezing.
John, we appreciate that. I think there's passion involved. And I think where there's passion, you know, there's sacrifice involved as well. But there's a great quote. I believe it's on your website. You're like, you want to become that soundtrack to these fighters as they come out. And you know, to me, I think since I beat Demetrius Johnson, pretty much all my title fights, I think I've only had you. I believe.
Well, that's the thing I take the most seriously is the championship calls, right? And you guys going back and you playing that knockout of Jorge Masvidal to your daughter. And I wanted all of those to be organic. I don't have any shtick. Certainly there are things that I have repeatedly said. I've called thousands of finishes, you know, that'll do it. But I want every championship call to be organic. I don't think about, you know, message sent or anything before I actually say it. Demetrius Johnson's the only fighter that I've ever thought about a potential fight-ending call for and working the word immortality in there because he was chasing such greatness. But I want those calls to be organic. And, you know, nothing made me happier than when Tom Aspinall knocked out Sergey Pavlovich and sends me a message just about the way he felt all week and the way he felt about the call. And as short as the fight was, we still worked his dad's name in there. That's all I am looking for in my life, I think, you know, is to do right by these athletes. And yeah, we take it very seriously, you know.
Yeah, and I think this is what makes you good is obviously you're trained. I mean, at the School of Broadcast Journalism in Gettysburg, which is freaking cool, man. You know,
that is super cool,
super awesome, man. But I think it's just the fact that you could just be so neutral. As you just said, you know, Bilal's a great friend of mine. He did this, I got on him. Dominic Cruz said this, I got on him. And I think that's what separates the UFC is the caliber of people that they're able to kind of bring in to really give you like the honest opinion. Not something that's really sugarcoated.
Well, and Kamaru Usman, you know how much love I have for you, right? Like, if he fights Bilal Muhammad, which is a distinct possibility,
it's going to happen.
Certainly people know about Bilal Muhammad in the Anik and Florian podcast business, right? Bilal and my twin brother do a show. But here's the thing. I go a lot further back with Kamaru. And so I can sit here right now and tell you I am going to have a lot of different emotions going in my head when those two fight. But as soon as these guys hit the tunnel, the last thing I'm thinking about is any sort of pre-existing relationship.
Right,
but I have a far longer foundation with Kamaru than I do Bilal.
It's such a crazy thing because I've actually had the pleasure of doing commentating,
right,
and sitting in there and being able to just you being able to stay there, whether it's a friend or not. If they're doing something in the fight that it's not serving them, you're gonna call it out. And in situations like that, you can't be biased. You kind of have to just do your job because that's your job that you are there for. And you've had a lot of moments inside the octagon, and sitting right there watching these fights. One question that I have for you is, I want you to give me your number one, but also I want to know what your top 5 moments that have floored you in the sport. And which is one thing that makes it so addicting because you're getting this hit every pay-per-view of something spectacular happening. I want to know what is your top 1 and then also your top 5 or top 3 moments that you've been cage-side.
So I'll try to be efficient with this. So I got to start with my guy, the lead horse, Mark Hunt, the all-time great heavyweight. He fought Antonio Bigfoot Silva in Brisbane, Australia, December 7th, Larry Bird's birthday in 2013. And I just remember thinking in Australia as we walked out of there in the morning, I just hope that everybody in the U.S. and around the world saw that fight. So I think that was a heavyweight fight that I will always put on a pedestal just for being an absolute war. But this conversation for me always begins with Rose Namajunas because she beat Zhang Weili and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She beat both those women fucking twice. But the manner in which she beat those women, certainly the first time she beat Joanna was the craziest thing that I had ever seen. There have been so many amazing moments. Glover Teixeira breaking through at 42 years of age. I think the most special thing, and it doesn't speak to just Bilal, it speaks to Jan Blachowicz, when a non-champion breaks through for the first time and changes their life forever. There's nothing quite like it, you know? And those are the most special moments for us. So Yeah, I mean, singularly in terms of fights, you know, I go back to Matt Brown and Eric Silva in Cincinnati, Ohio in 2014, a fight that I'll try to get into the Hall of Fame. A lot of great Tony Ferguson moments. I remember first when Joe Silva said to me that he wanted to put Tony Ferguson and Khabib Nurmagomedov together in 2015 when we were in the back of a van after an event, you know. It's crazy. There's been a lot of memories and plenty more to come, obviously.
Top 3 knockouts.
Right. Top 3 knockouts.
Knockouts you've seen.
Top 3 knockouts I've seen. I mean, can I just go number 3, Kamaru Usman against Jorge Masvidal? If anybody knows the circumstances surrounding that and certainly the pedestal that we all put Gamebred on as far as his boxing is concerned, we'll put that top 3. Henry Cejudo, maybe number 2 against TJ Dillashaw. Can we have a slot for that? I think we could do that, you know?
You're flattered because
On these airwaves, I don't know that I go Leon Edwards over Kamaru Usman in the top slot, you know, but that one...
Why'd you have to do that? Why'd you have to put him in that position?
I like that. I like that.
I didn't even see it, right? I get a lot of credit for that call.
Right.
There was this narrative that he was chasing a moral victory, and I looked down the broadcast table. And I said, yeah, but that's not the cloth from which he was cut. I missed the head kick.
Right.
But I did know that we had a new champion at that point in time. But, yeah, you guys for sure, and just the quick nature of that was just absolutely insane. But yeah, I mean, I think number 1, it's got to be Thug Rose against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and then she fucking head kicked Zhang Weili too. So,
yes, those are. I mean, those are amazing moments. Those are
we
crazy
could
moments.
I mean, there have been times in the booth. Vitor Belfort in 2013, I should say, the year of Vitor in Brazil was the craziest shit I've ever seen. And say what you want about his relative cleanliness, right? I think Joe Rogan has suggested maybe Dirty Vitor is the greatest fighter in UFC history, and I subscribe to that theory. But what he did to those 3 men, back to back to back, Michael Bisping, Dan Henderson, Luke Rockhold, in Brazil in 2013 was the craziest fucking shit that I had ever seen. So
yeah, no, of course. Obviously, John, like I'm there's a lot of things that I'm curious about. Like, what is a 7 days? I mean, what are those 7 days like when you get into like the pay-per-view time? Like, how is it that your life is kind of arranged in that week span? Like, how do you juggle from traveling to your scheduling? And obviously we appreciate you coming here and really giving the little bit of time that you have, but I'm just curious on that side.
So every time we do an event, it's at least twice the length of a Super Bowl. Minimally, we're 7 hours on a headset, and oftentimes I'm prepping 28 fighters. So the process begins about 10 days out. We do pre-voice a lot of things. When I took over for Goldie, I transitioned to do a lot more things live, which I prefer, and put less things on tape. It's a labor of love, to be sure, but oftentimes I'll say if there was a power outage and the fight card got delayed 4 hours, I can go prep another 4 hours, go watch more film, listen to another video interview. So my anxiety is thick when it comes to the preparation, not the performance. When I get to the arena, I'm good, but there's so much prep. Just 28 fighters. And I remember during COVID when we went to 15 and it was 30 fighters. And I'm saying to my bosses, something's going to fucking fall through the cracks, you know? One of these 30 fighters maybe lost a parent last week, and I'm not going to know it because there's just so much to do. So I don't know if this job will eventually break me, but it's a lot different than preparing for a football game. And I have been maybe told that I'm too serious at times, but I know no other way. And Brian Stanton was the guy who taught me a lot of these things. And nobody preps like that guy. So it's a lot, man. It's a real lot. And everything takes away. Like, I did an interview with Rolling Stone today, right? And maybe you think it'll be 12 minutes, ends up being 29. You lose 17 minutes there. You know, turned down a lot of media this week. Honored to be here with you guys, and that's why I'm prioritizing this. But like tonight, and I know this is going to be after the fact, we are rehearsing at Sphere from 3P to 1A. That normally would not be my reality.
Like, you're talking about like today.
Today.
So, oh my God. So
this is an undertaking unlike anything that we have ever done. And hopefully by the time people are watching this, we have pulled off this show largely without a hitch. But yeah, I think some shit could fucking go sideways.
Okay, in all the preparation, then you get through a fight week. In all of your years of calling fights, what would you say is the most electric crowd you've ever been in?
So it was in Montreal when Shogun Rua beat Lyoto Machida. George St. Pierre wasn't even fighting. It was the St. Pierre era. But the decibel level was crazy.
Which one is it?
It was in Montreal, so the Bell Center,
Montreal
I believe.
Bell Center, okay.
UFC 113, I believe it was.
Right.
And I've just never heard a live audience like that. And certainly the Canadians love their mixed martial arts. But I just remember thinking to myself, I think my grandfather had died a few days prior, and I wasn't in a great space, and the MMA fan base just completely flipped the switch on my mental. And I could not believe that those people got as loud as they did. I've been part of a lot of special crowds in Brazil. Right. You guys have fought all over the world. But I don't know that any crowd will ever top that one. And it was probably only 21,000 people or so.
Yeah.
Only.
Yeah,
That's, I think of your colleagues, man. Like obviously you're in there with Daniel Cormier and Joe Rogan. Talk to me about a little bit of the relationship that you guys have, and would that be the perfect three guys that you would just want to stick forever and maybe call it a career? Because I know how close you guys are. We always see the pictures of you guys. Oh,
yeah,
and then Daniel's like this, and then you're freaking doing the limbo, and then Joe Rogan with the
looks super fucking unattractive. But there was one time when I think Israel Adesanya knocked out Alex Pereira. Rogan nearly pushed me to the ground. Two just special, larger-than-life individuals, and it was crazy the first time I worked with Joe Rogan on 3 days' notice at UFC 155 in 2012. I was freaking out, but I stepped up and called that pay-per-view about a year into my time with the company, and I'll never forget the extent to which he embraced me then. He's just such an elite human being. It says nothing of all the work he has done and the Renaissance man that he is, but it's never lost on me when I look to my right and he is there. And so to have earned his respect, not even the hard way per se, but to have earned his respect has meant a great deal to me. And his praise has meant so much to my career and my public approval rating. And I think the way the UFC feels about me. So I just have eternal gratitude to Joe. And yeah, I mean, I've worked with probably 17, 18 different broadcast combinations, but I do crave one broadcast team. So whomever that is, certainly my kinship with Dominic Cruz is well documented, but yeah, I would like a consistent pay-per-view team. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes I say Brian Stan left me at the altar. We were building something and he just had a greater purpose in life. And if he wasn't going to be running this whole UFC show, with respect to my craft that is broadcasting, it's just a little bit too small for a human being that has as much value as Brian Stan. But that killed me when he left because I thought Stanek was potentially building something special.
I agree. I felt the same way. Now let's talk about you have a twin brother. Most people don't know that. Well, I mean, obviously, knowing you, the MMA space fans are starting to kind of realize that a little bit. Now you have a twin brother. Does he sound like you? Can he give that energy and can you guys swap out one day and just decide he's going to come to work for you?
It's a great question. And by the way, he's got a lot of love for you. So it's interesting because he was an actor. He majored in musical theater, went to Rollins College, Winter Park, Florida, graduated early because he got all these main stage roles and can sing and dance and tap and jazz and all these things. So my whole life, I'm being flown to go watch this dude perform. So it's very weird that I'm the guy who is now performing. But now I have like 20 years on the guy in terms of broadcast experience. So even though we sound the same, a lot of the polish that I have worked very hard on for 2 decades, maybe he is working on just now. But he's starting to get into the space a little bit. I begged him to sell his business, which he did. So thankfully, he's with me on the road as much as he can be. And he's doing big things. But it's the greatest blessing in my life. And you know, we are true monozygotic identical twins, same DNA, one fucking placenta, the real deal, born in the 1970s, right? So all that twin stuff really does happen, and there's really nothing that has been more of a benefit, I think, to my life, to my career. I think it has impacted other friendships I've had because I don't necessarily need my best friend or my wife for certain things because I got a living, breathing human being that is wired like I am. Just a little softer. That's right.
Just a little softer. You guys ever gotten in any scraps?
Yes.
Really? Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, I have actually been hospitalized with 3 concussions in my life. I was out cold on a basketball court twice.
From him?
So, no. But I can't take a shot. So the reason we haven't fought for charity, and maybe we would wrestle or grapple, but I have no chin, bro. Like, I have been out cold twice.
Yeah, you know Colby Covington's watching this.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I thought you guys wanted me to fight Goldie. I'll fight Colby if I have to. So we actually wrestled in the pool a couple weeks ago, and this dude was like manipulating digits at one point. I mean, I had an illegal groin strike, but no, we're always wrestling and grappling and messing around, but we're old men, so we're trying not to get hurt. I have a grade 3 torn labrum in my right shoulder. I can barely throw a ball. So I do think eventually we will fight for charity. at some point. We just have to find the right rule set, because I'm not going to step in there knowing that I truly can't take a shot. I know I can't take a shot. My 3-year-old caught me one time, and you know,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm really worried about my chin. That's the only reason I
Don't
haven't punched him
say
in the
that,
face,
because one
you
day,
know?
you know, they might try you. You know,
How would I test though? If I really wanted to do that,
Just don't do it. We need the mouthpiece, John. We need
what
it.
we do is we slow light sparring, but just slow light
Yeah.
sparring with
Just
headgear,
body.
Right. Right.
and you start to kind of build a little bit. You don't know if you could take a shot until you take a shot.
right.
So it's slow, you know,
Right.
maybe, and then you always hide the chin.
Right.
You can take these to the forehead all
Right.
day. You
Right.
might even hurt them. So
See, I just don't want to lose to him.
yeah,
You know, I could lose to him on our NFL podcast doing picks,
Yeah.
but I'd rather not lose to him in combat if I
Right.
could help it. You know,
right.
2025 is coming up. What are some of the fights that you're begging that these matchmakers are willing to make? You know, if you're to be Mick Maynard and and
So no, a lot of it is about the welterweight division, and
You know,
despite what a lot of people think, right? Bilal
Water's
Muhammad isn't necessarily calling the shots when it comes to a date. I can tell your wide audience that he's ready to go December 7th on Larry Bird's birthday, right? Whether or not he'll be afforded that opportunity fighting underneath Conor McGregor or headlining that show, I don't know. I do know that the promotion tried to put Jack Della Maddalena and Shavkat Rakhmonov together in Perth. Jack Della Maddalena is on the mend, and he is sort of out of the picture. This welterweight division is on fire. Ian Machado Gary factors prominently into this equation. And I will say, if any fighter with a couple of red stripes on his Wikipedia page of late deserves to fight for the belt right now, despite that reality, it is the Nigerian Nightmare. And for Bilal to want to fight arguably the greatest welterweight of all time in his first title defense is well within his right. Now, I don't know whether or not he's going to be afforded that opportunity, but why wouldn't you want a chance to fight either Kamaru Usman or George St. Pierre if you had the chance to do so? And the fact that people would criticize him for that, because maybe he would be a bigger underdog against Shavkat, to me is insane. So for me, 2025, it's all about the welterweights.
oh really? So what about 55, 45? Can you dabble a little bit on the rest
Yeah,
of the way
of
before
course.
we-
No, of
before we
course.
leave here?
So largely I want guys to stay in their divisions. And with respect to whatever two-division greatness Islam Makhachev is chasing, Arman Tsarukyan deserves his opportunity.
Right.
And there are other lightweights that are absolutely creeping. Featherweight is interesting.
But
Beca-
after that fight, John, I do believe he should go up. I mean, I don't know if that fight will ever happen because, you know, they're you know,
Yeah.
the Khabib and all that, they're all super
Right.
close. But Islam's right there. Once he if he gets this victory, I think he should go up.
Who's the greatest lightweight of all time, though? BJ Penn? Is it Khabib Nurmagomedov with his 3 title defenses, right? I mean, I don't care who you say is the best lightweight of all time,
That's
but
it.
Islam Makhachev's a big boy, and these are challenging weight cuts, right? But wouldn't it be nice to see him 6-7 times defend that belt and go down as the greatest lightweight of all time? I hear
I
you.
agree.
I
So you
hear
tell me, who is
but
the
with
greatest
all the guys
55er?
at welterweight, we have a log jam already. Ian Machado Gary, Jack Della Maddalena, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Kamaru Usman, all these guys have an argument in some capacity for a title shot right now. So I don't know that you need a lightweight champion moving on up with respect to the pound-for-pound king. As far as featherweight's concerned, Diego Lopez, who knows what happened against Brian Ortega, but he talks like a man that was almost guaranteed a title fight if he could finish Brian Ortega. So I think he's going to factor prominently in the equation at 45. T-City might have beat him by the time this is ingested. But it's interesting because I'm glad Max Holloway is getting this opportunity against Topuria. But
How do you see that fight?
Volkanovski-
Before we leave, John, I want to get your 2 cents on that. Could power beat somebody with volume? Could a guy like Ilia Topuria get inside to really hurt a guy like Max Holloway? Because, you know, he's gone up at 155 pounds. He's fought taller people, and he knocked that dude out. I forget his name, at 155 pounds. I want to say it was in London.
Danny Roberts, maybe?
I think so.
Yeah. So fascinating fight. UFC 308 on paper right
he
now
was getting
might be
beat up
the
too.
best fight card that I have ever been assigned. I can't give you a lean. If I suggest here that Max Holloway is a live underdog, that's about as far as I could go. You know, I do think there would probably be some value on Max in this spot. I don't worry about the weight for him at this stage of his career. I just think that he has matured over the years. I think he knows his body and his mind as well as he ever has. His personal life is in a great place. I think the strength and conditioning with Darren Yap has always been there. But I think you're going to get a close to prime Max Holloway, and we'll see what Topuria can do about it.
All right, my man, John. Thank you. We want to thank you so much for being
Thank
able
you
to come
guys.
in and spend a little bit of time with us. We know you're very, very busy this
Hey.
week. But before you go, once again, what we talked about, I truly mean it when I said everyone in this life is walking their journey. So try not to be too hard on yourself in making that decision on where the sacrifice is going to lie.
I appreciate that.
All right, my man.
I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you
Thank
guys.
you.
Best of
Amen.
luck. Keep this show going. Show's
you.
a monster already. Thank you guys all for having me.
Thank you. All right, Henry, my man, we just had the voice of the Octagon, JON ANIK, here with us, and had him just at least share some stories with us, and because I know everyone's wondering, you call all these fights, we get to hear your voice in every single one of these pay-per-views. What's the biggest fight? What's the craziest moment? Because there's been so many different moments. I think it was kind of interesting just to kind of hear his moments that blew his mind. And some of those were in line with some of the ones that I had. What'd you think?
Yeah, no. First of all, I thought out of everything that you said, Kamaru, I thought it was really nice of you, man, to say that, because as humans, we do live our own life. Like we live in us
100%.
and we die in us.
True.
And I think when you said that, I could tell his demeanor, like it was like there was like a splash of peace that you just gave him. You know what I'm saying? Because I will say this about the interview. This is something that I've asked him before, but I think now I've always wanted to kind of get him to go a little more thorough on that. How do you juggle the family life? And obviously you're here, and he's heartfelt. I feel like there's with everything that we do, there's a sacrifice that needs to be done. But I also feel too that he's also, he's not with his family like a traditional father would be, but he also showing his kids like, man, go after your dream, live your dream.
100%.
You know what I'm saying? I think, and I hope his kids, or whatever the situation may be, because he did kind of mention it. You know what I mean? He was like, yeah, I wish I could, I wish I could be a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think that's something that as parents, that's something that parents that actually are present, that care. I think that's something that we all kind of battle with is the fine line of understanding, am I there enough or am I not there enough? But it's understand, and we do that because you grow up hearing people say, man, I want to give my kids what I didn't have. I want to do better than my parents did for me in some cases. But what you don't realize is by you saying you want to give your kids the things that you don't have, how are you going to do that if you don't work for it? In most cases, some people win the lottery, but in most cases. So in order for you to do that, which means you're going to have to work more, which means you're going to be gone more. So something's going to suffer either way. Either you stay home more to where that paycheck don't come in like it should come, to where you can afford to give them the luxuries that you would like to, or you go and work more to where you're not as home more, to where something is taken away. But it's understanding and just being at peace with knowing that you did right by yourself, because this is your journey. At the end of the day, when you're 90 or 100 and you're laying in that bed and it's time for God to call you home, and you're going, I was you what you don't want to do, and from the research and the things that I've heard and studied, what you don't want to do is be laying there going, man, I didn't do enough for myself. I didn't do all the things that I should have done with the gifts that God gave me personally, because your kids are blessed with their gifts as well. Yeah. And it's their journey. It's their journey to be able to find and hone those gifts. So it takes a lot of work.
And for those who don't know, this man right here, he's very smart. He's a sociology major too. For those who don't know,
Work on it.
So I like to whenever I'm really kind of like, hey, Kush, what do you think about this?
Yeah,
I think it's really good that you majored in that, and just the way that you're looking at life, and because something like that could really allow him to do his job even better.
Right.
Because he doesn't need to fight. He doesn't need to fight himself, or because
right,
somebody's mad at him.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Right, and that's the battle. That's a battle. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, it's still his battle in his head.
Yeah.
So he might be at peace we might have given him peace for that.
So
30, 40 minutes.
So you've read the 4 agreements.
Bro, you walk, yes, I have. Bro, you walk out of here.
See, Kush, I got you.
You walk out of here and it might set in again. Or you might read a text message that might say, Daddy, I miss you. It's like, damn, I could be home right now. Yeah. Or it's, Daddy, something happened. Dang, I should be there to, that's always going to come. But at the end of the day, it's your journey. So you have to live it to the best way that you can, because your kids are going to have their journey and they have to live it to the best way that they can. So it's all relatively, it's a cycle. It's just a life cycle. It keeps going and going and going and going, and you can't stop it. So in your time here, you better do the best that you can with the gifts that you've been given. And obviously he's been blessed with the gift to be that voice of the Octagon, to where, and you see how easy, you see how quick that was? As soon as he sat down and he knew the camera's rolling, boom. All right, guys. He jumped right into character, which I love. And that just goes to show the years and years and years of preparation that he's put in. He actually called my win, my Ultimate Fighter win, which happened to be my, I guess, first fight in the UFC. He called that with Brian Stan.
Yeah.
And I remember that moment. And then after that, I've had a lot of moments with it. After that, I was on the show called The Ultimate Insider, which he was on. He was the host of that show. Yeah. So I got to sit down with him one-on-one, and we did an interview, just like this, one-on-one interview.
Yeah. But I will say there's something that did surprise me in the interview. And if you go back and we listen to it, he said, I'm on this job because there's somebody out there to pretty much take it.
Facts.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Just like, fuck. I mean, I was like, yeah, Jon Anik's going to be here forever. But in reality is he's kind of right.
100%.
Like, there's always a young buck that was in his position, just like what he was to Mike Goldberg.
Right.
And then eventually, the roles were switched.
Yes.
But I think Jon also knows that there is a shelf life to this. It could, who knows when it's actually going to be. And then also too, one of the things, like, dude, I want to know how long that I could actually do this. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then maybe one of the things is, like, could Jon go back and maybe live a normal life of being home a lot more? I mean, would he be able to change that? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but it's the thing is, how do you do that? Because right now, it's the thing is, it stings a little bit, because you're watching your children grow at a distant pace, at a distance, you're watching them grow. And so it tugs at you a little bit. But let's say he does his 20 here and he decides, you know what, I'm going to retire. And he goes home. But your kids are now 20, 18, 20. They don't require the attention that they required at that time, where it was tugging at your heart, like, maybe I should be home more. That's the time. So there's really no right thing to do here. It's whatever he decides is the right thing to do by himself on his journey is what's good. And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to. We were having such a great conversation. I didn't get a chance to tell him. I was actually I was coming back from, where was I at? I was coming back from a trip somewhere. I think Atlanta. And I was on the train in the airport to the next terminal. And I'm in the train. I'm walking and I'm sitting down. And a guy comes in. He's jeans, an older gentleman. His jeans and his hat and his coat and his bag. And he's a super nice gentleman. And he kind of, hey, is that seat taken? And I'm like, no. And so I scoot over and I let him. And he sits next to me. And as he sits next to me, I just get this. I'm getting this feeling, getting this aura, like, I know this guy. Maybe I know this guy. And I didn't realize. I'm like,
and this was what year?
This was less than a year ago. So I'm sitting next to the guy, and I'm thinking, who is this guy? Who's this guy? Who's this guy? And I can tell who's the guy. So, and we're talking. He's talking to me. And we're talking back and forth. And I'm thinking, should I ask him? But I don't want to be rude, because you're in the airport, you're on the bus. I don't want to just be in somebody's business like that. Like, what do you do? This and that. So he's talking to me. He's like, yeah, I'm headed home to North Carolina, and this, and we, small talk. So we get off, and he's walking off, and I'm like, who is that guy? Guy looks like a commentator. And I'm on my phone. And I started just searching. I'm like, commentator. I don't know how I even got it. I'm like, commentators, I'm searching. Turns out the guy was freaking Jim Lampy.
Oh shit! Yeah.
Remember, you know who Jim Lampy is?
Yeah,
Remember?
Jim Lampy, yeah, HBO. Yeah.
HBO legendary boxing commentator. And I'm just like, I sat next to Jim Lampy on the train, had a conversation, didn't ask him, I don't, and then obviously I don't want to introduce, I didn't want to, it's a random. I don't necessarily want to be bothered to tell him who I was or anything. So I'm wondering, did he know who I was? Did he not know who I was? Hey, Jim, what's up, bro? Yeah. So it was crazy. I wanted to share that story with him and just say, like, that's how much these commentators that are the voice of the sports that we grow up loving, that's how big and how much they actually mean to people.
Yeah.
And so John, I believe, is going to realize that one day when he's said and done, he's going to realize the impact that he's had on the sport,
right,
and the impact that he's had on changing it, of course, growing it to where it is now.
Yeah, and it's kind of what he said is he's a soundtrack to our journey throughout the UFC and mixed martial arts, and it is special. And both of us, we both fought the same way. Man, where's Mike Goldberg? But then once you get the hang of it, it's like, dude, this dude is just, he gets it.
Right now.
He gets it. Like, he's so, like, it would be hard to replace a guy like that studies the game. Like, he's talking about, if the lights go out and 4 hours later, like if I have 4 hours to kind of, shoot the shits, like, dude, I'm out there studying, I'm watching fights. I'm like, godly, talk about somebody that really takes it to the next level. There ain't nobody taking that dude's job.
Right.
With that dedication.
Right. And he puts the time in and it shows. I mean, Dateline USA. We are live. I mean, he's got it down. And of course, when you hear that sound come on and you hear
one more sleep,
lights come on, it is time for action. So it was a great interview. It was great to hear about him, study him a little bit, and get to know a little bit more about John and his twin brother. He ain't really give us the detail. One of the craziest things him and his twin brother has done, in life now. But we can ask him sometime later on that.
Overall, how would you rate this interview if you had to choose a couple words?
Fantastic interview. I think it was great to get to know a guy that's so instrumental in people enjoying the sport that we, participate in. But, as always, I'm the Nigerian Nightmare, Kamaru Usman.
Henry Cejudo, a.k.a. Triple C.
You see how my one arm is bigger than both of yours?
Shit. I don't know, Kush. We're gonna have to.
You pumped those up before you came, huh? Yeah, I know he did.
Look, Kush.
We are out.